Hi, good morning, evening, night to anyone that's watching us. We are super happy to have here an all-female panel today talking about climate change and health. We will be discussing with all these amazing people what are the impacts that climate change and air pollution have in our health. And to begin with, I just want to remind you what is this campaign and what are we doing here, just for you to get a bit of context. So, hi, Climate Tracker. You remember you are part of this campaign. We are in the first publishing window. That means that you have 2 weeks to publish articles, and they are about two broad topics. I mean, you can write more or less what you want, but we suggested two topics. The first one is the webinar we did last week, which was about breaking free from fossil fuels. Like, why do you want in your country to liberate yourself from fossil fuels? And the second topic is the one we are talking today. It's about the health impacts that these greenhouse gases have in our health systems. So today we invited some amazing people for you to get inspired, so you can write articles from this experience today in the webinar. I would like to welcome you. Let's see, we have today Jennifer Wang, who is coordinator of the Healthy Energy Initiative with Healthcare Without Harm. We have Mariana Veras from the Laboratory of Experimental Air Pollution from the Sao Paulo School of Medicine. And then Alice McGushin from the International Federation of Medical Students Associations. And of course, Ayin is joining us. She's also from Climate Tracker, and she will be doing the social media. So I will first ask Ayin to explain us how to ask questions on this live webinar today, and then we will go on for questions with our speakers.
Okay, hi, good evening everyone. Well, good evening in the Philippines and good morning to the other side of the world. So if you want to ask questions, you can definitely tweet us at climate tracking, and you can use the hashtag call for climate and hashtag climate tracker. You can also, if you are in our climate tracker groups, you can post your questions in the group or in the event webinar page.
Great, thank you, Ayin. So I hope you all sent great questions to these ladies today. And I will start having a question for Jennifer, which is if she can give a brief introduction of what's the Healthy Energy Initiative.
Okay, hi. I guess I'm on, right? You can hear me? Okay. So the Healthy Energy Initiative is a project of Healthcare Without Harm, but it's not just Healthcare Without Harm. We work with a network of partners all around the world, specifically in a handful of target countries, but also globally. So the whole idea behind it is that the energy choices affect health, both directly through local air and water pollution, as well as globally through its impacts on climate change. And it's getting to a point where we can no longer deny those impacts. The evidence is increasingly clear, both through global studies as well as more localized studies for specific areas. And there's increasingly a movement of health sector professionals and students and other people who are interested in doing something about this. So the Healthy Energy Initiative is basically a global collaboration of the health sector to engage in science-based advocacy to move away from fossil fuel-based power generation with a specific focus on coal, but not limited to coal, and towards clean, renewable, healthy energy choices. The partners that we work with are located in Australia, China, India, the Philippines, South Africa, as well as Europe. In each of those places, they are engaging with the health sector on campaigns for research, education, and advocacy towards a transition to renewables. Not only do they work within the health sector, but they partner with organizations that are, like grassroots community efforts, as well as, reaching out to policymakers to look at sort of what we can do to institutionalize consideration of the health impacts of energy choices in policy decision making. Besides in those specific countries, which we chose because those were some of the areas where coal is expanding the fastest, or is projected to grow, or there's an increasing threat, or there's a lot of local pollution impacts. Besides in those sort of specific target countries, we also do some advocacy at the international level in terms of working with organizations, like kind of large international health organizations like the World Health Organization, the World Federation of Public Health Associations, and the World Medical Association to help them get engaged in advocacy around this. The idea is that by engaging with these international sort of overarching organizations, that we can create the legitimacy for their member organizations in specific countries to be able to act in those countries as well. So, so it's a, I guess it's a think global, act local, but also act global kind of approach. I will leave it at that for now and let others kind of give more of a background as well.
Sure, thank you. So you said that you were you were advocating with the science perspective, so having a very nice background, and that's where I want to move to Mariana, because she's a researcher and she researches at the Laboratory of Experimental Air Pollution. So what do you research about?
Hi everybody. In our lab we conduct basic research related to air pollution, mainly epidemiological studies and also experimental studies. I coordinate these kind of studies using animal models to understand better how these pollutants how pollutants impact our health. But also we have groups doing biomonitoring and also working on urban planning. It's an interdisciplinary laboratory. We have different kinds of professionals working together in the lab. And our lab is our city. We are located in São Paulo, Brazil. That is a city, unfortunately, with moderate to high levels of air pollution, and we are producing a lot of knowledge here in Brazil concerning air pollution. But unfortunately, we are doing. We are showing the effects of the pollution of our city in our health, but nothing are being done to change this situation, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mariana. And then I would move to Alice, because she comes from the International Federation of Medical Students Associations. And first we wanted to know if you can summarize, what is it?
Yes, certainly. So the International Federation of Medical Students Associations, or IFMSA, is an organization consisting entirely of medical students. It's international, and it consists of representative countries, so organizations from 116 different countries, meaning it represents over 1 million medical students worldwide. And this organization exists to advocate and run projects in various areas that affect health. And this includes public health, sexual and reproductive health, medical education, human rights and peace. And over the last number of years, IFMSA has been very active in the area of climate change and health, which has included running workshops, educating other medical students, and preparing people to go back to their own countries to run their own projects to educate their medical students and the general public, as well as advocating at the UNFCCC Conference of Parties. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've seen some of you in the COP21 in Paris for sure. So here I have the first question for all of you. Let's see if we can add to each other's responses, and it would be from a health perspective. I think Jennifer talked about it a bit. Why we should stop burning fossil fuels?
Oh, sorry. Did you want me to answer, or does
anyone can start? So I think it's you now.
Okay. I can start with a brief answer, I guess. And it's really great to have actually Alice and Mariana on the call as well to give more depth to some of my answers, maybe. But from our perspective, we need to break free from fossil fuels because we can do better. It's clear that, I guess from the perspective of the Healthy Energy Initiative, it's clear that energy access provides a lot of benefits to health. And that's something that I think is always at the forefront of what we're doing because it's one of the first arguments that's thrown against our arguments against coal, is that coal is the cheapest, quote-unquote cheapest, most readily available, energy source for providing electricity to all the millions of people in the world who don't currently have access to it. And without access to electricity, there's a lot of health impacts in terms of not having electricity, not having clean cooking fuel, and not having adequate health services even. So there's a lot of direct and indirect impacts of energy on health. However, we now know that it's actually not true to call coal and other fossil fuels cheap. There's no such thing as clean coal, unfortunately, and it's no longer. I'm going to quote a publication that came out last year where it's no longer a matter of having the science or the evidence to prove this. It's actually more now a matter of having the political will to go about this transition. And this was something that came out from many years of research in this community. But last year there was a landmark report from The Lancet, which is one of the world's leading medical journals, that summarized a lot of the latest evidence on climate change and health. And that was one of their messages, that it's now a matter of political will to act on this, and also that dealing with climate change is one of the greatest opportunities for global health in the 21st century. So that's kind of how we see it, is that by breaking free from fossil fuels and going towards this transition, you'll have co-benefits. So not only will you not only will we be able to prevent catastrophic climate change, which has a whole myriad of health impacts, but we'll also have these health co-benefits, meaning immediate reductions in air pollution at the local and regional levels, in reductions in water pollution, and those have impacts in terms of livelihoods, in terms of people's homes, and also I think if we look sort of more broadly at a clean energy future, I think it's something that we need some urgency behind, because it's clear that the trajectory that we're on is not fast enough, is not aggressive enough in order to provide a clean energy future for the future generation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Does any of you want to add something? Maybe Alice or Mariana?
Yes, I want to say something. From the health perspective, we can separate the effects of burning fossil fuels in direct effects and in the indirect effects. When we burn these fossil fuels, coal or gasoline or diesel, we produce not only greenhouse gases but also particles. And in terms of health, these particles are very dangerous. They enter our body and can be distributed to different organs, and not only affecting the respiratory health, cardiovascular system, but now we know that the reproductive health and also the nervous system can be dangerously impacted by these particles. And concerning the indirect effects, we can include the climate change, and also this difference in temperature can have a serious impact on health, mainly in elderly and also in children. And we are seeing this in different countries. A recent study from the head of our laboratory, Paulo, has shown that there is increasing rates of mortality associated with difference in the temperature in different countries, including Brazil.
Thank you, Mariana. Do you want to add something, Alice?
I don't have much to add to what Mariana and Jennifer have already said, but from the perspective of medical students and junior doctors, we are the ones who are beginning our careers and who will continue to work over the following decades. And as we're aware, if we don't take action on climate change now, if we don't stop burning fossil fuels, the health impacts will continue to grow and continue to impact on current and future generations. And so for us as medical students now, our prerogative is to protect our current and future patients, and also this will impact on our own careers as we see more injuries and death from fossil fuels.
Yeah, thank you, Alice. It's not an easy thing to be a young person in the face of climate change. So Mariana already said some of the examples of the impacts that air pollution and climate change can have in our health. I'm thinking of like concrete things, like she was talking about the respiratory system and things like this. Maybe we can give some examples so people that are listening to us can have a better idea of what happens because of that.
In the respiratory system, okay. Most of the people think that air pollution could only impact our respiratory system. It's obvious because we are breathing the contaminated air. But the most common effects are related to this respiratory system, but not only this, air pollution could exacerbate other health problems that you have previous disease, like asthma. During the winter season in Brazil, where the levels of air pollution increase, we have increases in the hospital admissions for asthma and other respiratory problems. In the cardiovascular system, in periods where there are increased levels of mainly particles, we have seen that most of the effects, health effects, are associated to these particles. And burning fossil fuels are mainly responsible for these particles. That's why it's so important to stop burning these fossil fuels. In the cardiovascular system, the impacts are related to heart attacks. Oh, I'm sorry. There are so many effects to choose. One is to choose some are so difficult. We have hypertension, we have stroke, we have arrhythmia, and many others. Depending on the age of the study population, you have different effects. And further, from the reproductive health, what we have seen in humans and also in animal models is that exposure to air pollution decreases the fertility and also impacts the fetus development. We have increased risk for low birth weight, prematurity, and now new evidence are pointing that preeclampsia could also be related to exposure to air pollution. That is a serious problem when you think of pregnant women, mainly in countries, in that countries that we have the high levels of air pollution. We have higher population exposed, and so it's really a huge problem from the perspective of public health. So, and also more recently, other effects like in the nervous system are being related also to air pollution. So pregnant women exposed to air pollution are prone to have children with some of these behavior problems. Children with, I forgot, sorry, in English, this kind of behavior problems that children have. They are very active or have difficulties to learning and memorize. I forgot the technical number for this. So, but
deficit and hyperactivity.
Hyperactivity, yes, and difficult to learn compared to children that were whose mother were not in polluted areas. That is, it's real a problem. We are seeing that there is increasing rates of this problem in the population, and also autism too could be related to air pollution. So what we are doing, we are generating a weak population with respiratory problems, cardiovascular problem, behavior problem, developmental problem, and we are showing this, and it seems that it's not strong enough to change the situation. In Brazil, I can talk about Brazil. The health sector has no power to change the situation compared to the agricultural sector of the fuel industry. What we show is not strong enough to change the situation. We are still, we have no value. Our health, it's not so important for our governor, unfortunately.
Yeah, thanks, Mariana. That relates to what Jennifer was saying, that we know the data, now we have to act. Do you want to add anything else on examples on how climate change or air pollution impact our health? Maybe Alice or Jennifer? But Mariana did a good list, though.
I think from, I think Mariana gave a really comprehensive answer, especially focused on air pollution. I think in terms of air, just like I'm trying to think of the other air pollution effects, but when we're like, in our focus on coal, coal is also an emitter of mercury, which ends up sort of contaminating waterways with methylmercury, and it can ends up in food through fish that people consume, and that also has effects on pregnant women and children, and it can have effects on the development of children as well. But I guess we don't usually think of that necessarily as an air pollutant, but it does, it goes in the air and then it ends up in water and in food. I was also thinking about some of the other effects of that we've looked at in terms of energy, well, especially focused on energy and health. In terms of occupational health, that's one of the dimensions we've looked at. There's just the whole process of fossil fuel extraction, transport, combustion, and disposal is a lot more dangerous for workers in that industry than we've seen evidence for in a lot of the renewable energy industries. Obviously, a lot of that, the workers' safety and health issues, have to do with the standards for labor in various countries. And so the International Labor Organization has a set of standards, and there's also national standards and maybe even local standards within countries. But unfortunately, it's very easy for those standards to either not be strong enough or not be enforced. And so we've all heard about the tragedies in terms of workers in mines being trapped in mines or other sort of major mine accidents. But there's also sort of more kind of insidious health effects in terms of coal workers who get black lung disease because of their exposure to the coal dust within the mines. There's obviously just a lot of risk for injury. There's risk for noise and other occupational hazards involved. So we believe that by moving to cleaner energy choices, that there's an opportunity to improve occupational health as well. I think also there's a lot of focus on air pollution, and it's absolutely justified, just because the World Health Organization came out with a study a couple of years ago showing that using numbers from 2012, that there's 7 million people who die prematurely every year from the health effects of air pollution. And that's just premature deaths. That doesn't even take into account all of the morbidity in terms of reduced level of health. So it's a major problem. And earlier this year, actually, the World Health Organization released a report on just the health impacts of environmental pollution. And again, the result was that the environment is really important for health, and air pollution is a really big part of the environmental health problem. But besides air pollution, some of the issues that we're dealing with and that we've seen from some of our partners around the world are not just related to air, but where these pollutants eventually end up in water, or sometimes in the sort of the coal production pipeline. There's leaks in the pipeline, so you'll end up with coal ash that's polluting a local waterway that's ecologically sensitive. It's been used by local fishermen for many, many decades. Children play in it. And so you have these effects on water, on sediment, on soil that have pretty direct and stark impacts on the communities that rely on that water, whether it's for drinking or for recreation or for livelihoods, especially fishing and tourism. So those are some impacts that are, I wouldn't say they're ignored, but they're just less, maybe they're like a little less obvious, but still very important for the communities that are affected. And another health impact that we're seeing is it's kind of more addressing the sort of what we call the social determinants of health, which is when there's a coal-fired power plant and there's another one going in, and I actually was able to visit such a site in the Philippines last month. So there's a 600 megawatt coal-fired power plant next to a village that's they're actually kind of squatting on government land, but they've been there for many decades. So they're an established community. They're not an informal settlement. They have permanent structures. They have a community network. They have their lives set up there. And the power plant is trying to double in size. And so they're slowly encroaching upon the land where this village is settled, and chopping down the trees and starting to build structures and really coming up right against the edge of the houses. And they're promising compensation for the residents to move, to relocate. It's a really small amount considering how long they've been there and how much they rely on that place for their livelihoods. And so now the community group is taking it up with the Human Rights Commission in Manila, and so it's really not just a direct health, like an air pollution issue. It's really kind of getting more at the core determinants of what makes a good life. It's stability. It's knowing that where you live is not going to be suddenly uprooted. It's having a good, a stable, source of employment. It's knowing where your food comes from. It's having a place where your children can go to school. So it's a lot of the things that are rooted within, I guess, there's just a lot of issues around displacement of communities when there's a new development. And you know, there are technically, I guess, mechanisms in place to prevent some of these, to prevent displacement, but unfortunately, I think a lot of big energy developments are driven by companies that, whether, you know, because of their influence, I think, in the government, and a lot of governments who really believe that they want to very strongly support fossil fuel development because it's a, you know, a cheap and quick energy source. A lot of hoops get jumped through, or no, a lot of barriers get knocked down in terms of the regulatory process. And so the laws that we have in place in terms of, you know, even just, you know, air pollution emission standards, it's great to have the standards, but when your power plants aren't meeting those standards and your cities are seeing ambient pollution levels that are way above those standards, there's clearly a problem with enforcement. So I'm kind of jumping around here, but I guess I'm saying there's, I think besides air pollution, yeah, there's issues with other sources of pollution, as well as issues with the land. So air, water, and land are all pretty important when it comes to subsequent health impacts.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was really interesting. Air, water, and land. Yeah, we will remember that. And maybe Alice wants to add something to that, talking about health impacts of climate and air pollution.
I think that both Mariana and Jennifer have done a really good overview, and don't think I have anything in particular to really add to that.
I'm sorry, then we always make you speak less, and next time you start. My next question would be, we have been talking about pollution in general, but we know that there's things that pollute more than others. For instance, we know that renewable energy is the one that will not pollute, but I'm sure you have like ranking of, for example, we know coal is like one of the worst sources when it comes of health issues. So let's talk about a bit how different sources of energy affect our health. And now it's your turn, Alice. I don't know if you have something ready.
I guess, well, coal is the most obvious fuel energy source that impacts on health, and we know this because there's by far the most evidence looking at the health impacts of coal through air pollution and, as discussed, through other metals such as mercury. There is far less evidence, but there's a lot of concern regarding the use of fracking, the use of unconventional gas, and the impacts that that has, the actual extraction itself, on the health impacts of people. There's, as far as we're concerned, there's not enough studies, not enough information looking at these health impacts. But from what we can see, there are a lot of reports of various impacts, which might be Jennifer may be able to expand on. In terms of injuries, illness, and death per kilowatt hour, looking at solar and renewable energies, we know solar and winds, we know that they have far less impact on people's health. Of course, no industry is completely without harm, but we know that there's far less harm with renewable sources. I'll let Jennifer and Mariana expand on that.
Great, thank you, Alice. Who wants to go now? Mariana, Alice? Yeah.
Hi. Okay. We are talking about renewable energy. I can talk a little about the experience in Brazil with biofuels, and the toxicity of these biofuels are really less compared to fossil fuels. But by the other side, the production of these biofuels, I mean sugarcane, for producing biofuels, also produce two big problems. One, deforestation for the crops, sugarcane crops, and the other huge problem is before harvesting, it's common to burn all the crops. So we produce a lot of smoke twice a year before harvesting, and the impacts on health from people in the cities around these crops is really, really huge. It's a big problem, and we try to change the law in Brazil prohibiting these crops to be burned before harvesting, but it changed very little, and we still have the problem. We have the biofuels, okay, it's good, it produces less particles, but to produce these biofuels, we produce a lot of problems before, deforestation and also air pollution from crops burning. So it's something that it's not really, really good. And here in Brazil, I think the coal is not a problem for us. Our industry, we use more hydroelectric energy produced. So, but now we are having problems with water scarcity, and we are reactivating our coal plants for electric generation. So we are going back on time. We are moving backward and not forward. And so we produce, I don't know, it's very strange. We are fighting against climate change, producing renewable energy, using other methods for energy generation, but air pollution is increasing in our country. So something is going wrong here.
Yeah, thanks, Mariana. Do you want to add something, Jennifer?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that those are great examples from Alice and Mariana, and this is like the old school slideshow. So it's like show and tell. We have this, we produced a guide on the health impacts of energy choices, which you can find on our website, healthyenergyinitiative.org, and it's just, I think it's like 10 or 12 pages, so it's not a super long read. And one of the pages in the guide is this comparison chart of the health impacts of energy choices. So, along this, each of the rows represents a different energy source, and each of the columns talks about public health impacts, occupational health impacts, and climate and health impacts. So it's not very comprehensive. In fact, I'm looking at my biofuels column, and we didn't talk about the burning of the crop before harvest. So, but we did talk about the impacts on deforestation. And so I think the idea is like we cannot definitely treat any of the low CO2 energy sources as panaceas to sort of providing healthy energy. I think we need to look at the various dimensions of health. And Alice mentioned about fracking too. It's in the United States, we've switched from coal. We're actually well on our way to phasing out coal, but a lot of that energy demand has been replaced by natural gas, and there's a huge expansion in fracking. And there's now evidence of, within the last few months, I think, evidence of massive leakages in methane, which is a very potent climate pollutant, as well as has local health impacts for the local air quality. And it's also very water intensive, so it's water intensive, so it affects water quantity and access, and it's also it uses a lot of toxic chemicals in the fracking process, which can contaminate water. In terms of hydroelectric, that's something we've also looked at a little bit, especially with large dams. There's a lot of issues with just, obviously displacement of populations, and that's something that I think still needs to be considered, and think a lot of, certain countries are considering expansion in their hydroelectric power production, but I think we need to consider carefully what the repercussions would be, as well as what, it's not just like the direct health impacts, but it's also how resilient is this energy system to, I mean, really to climate change, like Mariana was saying, we're now facing water scarcity, which is exacerbated by climate change. So it's kind of, I wish there was like an easier answer of like which is the best and which is the worst. We're actually turning this chart into a fact sheet with more symbols and like red, green, yellow, but it's not, there's some that are better than others, but there's no perfect solution. So I think we just need to be, as health experts, I think it's our role to weigh in on that.
Thank you. We're looking forward for this chart with colors and stuff. I like colors. Okay, I will have a last question for you all, because I think it's getting a bit late for the ones that want to go to sleep and the ones that want to go to work. So my last question would be, before Ayin jumps to the public, it's how are communities responding against the threat of climate change and air pollution? So I know the International Federations of Medical Students have just produced a report, and maybe Alice wants to tell about that, about how to talk about climate change. But also Jennifer works on coordinating people all around the world. So let's see how you are responding, or how your communities are around that. Whoever wants to go first.
Sure, I'm happy to go first. So medical students around the world have been taking action on climate change and health through educating their peers and the public, as well as going to their local governments, their national governments, to encourage them to take stronger action to phase out fossil fuels and to take stronger action on climate change. As medical students with a passion in fossil fuels and health and climate change and health, most of our knowledge has been informal and self-taught through reading reports, reading papers, attending workshops and attending conferences. And what we've found is that there's not much information out there that's really accessible for young people and for young professionals. And we feel very, very strongly that everyone should have an awareness and understanding of the health impacts of climate change, and also have the confidence to take that knowledge and act upon it through advocacy and through encouraging change. So we developed this manual on climate change and health that looks at the health impacts of climate change, the science of climate change, the health co-benefits and opportunities that arise from action on climate change. And it also has a whole section looking at different ways to educate others, to run workshops, to how to run a campaign, and also has a vast array of topics and links to resources for the different topics looking at health and climate change and fossil fuels. So we hope to use this manual, for the education of, as well as other students and young professionals, and ultimately the wider public as well.
Awesome. Alice, we'll make sure that we share it in our social media too, so people that are watching us can have it. Jennifer or Mariana, you can, yeah.
Hi, I can say a couple of things about, again, drawing upon experiences from our partners. So it's really trying to bring together health professionals in the health sector and use their voice, which is just an extension of what Alice was saying. It's just not necessarily with students, but kind of taking the voice and the trust that the sort of health sector has within societies to engage with communities, to engage within their own sector, as well as to engage with policymakers and industry. Some examples of where that's being done in Australia. I think Alice has been active with the Climate and Health Alliance in Australia, and they've done a ton of work on policy advocacy, including, I think recently they have plans to talk to parliamentarians about a coal mining moratorium in I think New South Wales, don't quote me on that. In India, I know that our partners have been organizing these sort of lecture/site visits within public health and medical schools. So students and professors are getting introduced to the health impacts of energy choices in a lecture format, and then in the afternoon they go out to a site to visit communities that are actually affected to sort of make that more concrete draw. And then as a result of some of that advocacy work, they were able to organize health experts to write public commentaries and op-eds in response to the new emissions rules for coal-fired power plants. And so there's a lot of examples of that where like the health voice is really needed to critique policy efforts that have direct impacts on health. It seems logical, but unfortunately, health professionals are not necessarily trained. They're often not trained to be communicators, and sometimes it's even frowned upon to do advocacy because you're supposed to be more focused on generating the evidence. But the evidence is not going to do any good if it's not used for advocacy. So we're trying to bridge that gap. In the Philippines, I know that we're trying to engage with their Department of Health, which is like their health ministry, on doing health impact assessment for projects in environmentally critical areas. In South Africa, they're doing something similar, trying to get health experts engaged in the environmental impact assessment process. And they're also doing a lot of community outreach. They produced an award-winning documentary on the health impacts of coal, and they're going to the communities that are affected to screen the documentary and to basically raise awareness among the public, the policymakers, and the health officials there about this problem, because without this documentary and without this narrative, the narrative that they hear is from the coal industry, which is coal is good for your health and it's going to provide you with steady electricity access. Unfortunately, those communities are the last ones to experience the effects of electricity access, and instead they're experiencing the pollution that comes along with it first. So those are just a few of the examples, but it's really trying to bridge the gap between the knowledge and the advocacy, and trying to support communities while bringing up their issues to the level of policymakers.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do you want to add something, Mariana, on your experience in Sao Paulo?
Very little, because here, unfortunately, again, in our country, people are not really concerned about climate change and the health effects of air pollution. And when we have some initiatives in our city to reduce the use of car, people get very, very angry with bus lanes, bike lanes, and people prefer to have their cars and do not think in air pollution or these things. But last year, we have serious problem with water scarcity in the whole country. And then now the governors and the public sector start thinking about our future, and I think that now we are starting to make plans and things to be prepared for the future. But we are just in the beginning. We are just talking about the problem. It's the beginning, but doing something effective, no, we are still doing nothing in our country. There are some initiatives, but local initiatives, but not an effort from the population. When I talk to people on the street, or I use bus to go to my work, I never use the car, I try to do my part, and I talk with other people, they do not believe in climate change. This is a problem that scientists say, but it's not true. And if you think in Brazil, we are a huge country with a lot of water, rivers, and green areas. it's even, I think, hard for people to believe in this, but we are already feeling the climate change here in our country, but doing very little to change this, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mariana. And now I think it's Ayin's turn to tell us what are the questions from our audience.
Yes. Hi. We have a lot of questions from our audience, but I will probably pick maybe three because we are running out of time. So the first question is very interesting. One of our trackers is asking because fossil fuels like coal power plants will not be shut down immediately. He is asking how will how do communities adapt or have preventive measures to help them decrease health impacts? What can they do to in their communities to prevent these health impacts that coal power plants or other fossil fuels bring?
Thank you, Ayin. Does someone want to go for that one?
Well, it's sorry. Would you speak, Jennifer? Could you, please?
Oh, okay. Sure, I can go, but you can go too. I was just going to say that there's not a really good way to deal with it, unfortunately, but some ways that some tactics that we're seeing is, of course, advocating for better emissions controls on the power plants, and so that can be through prescriptive measures like installing scrubbers, or they can be through performance standards like emission standards. So I mentioned in India they have updated their emission standards, but only for newer power plants. So some of the old ones are still grandfathered into the old rules, but at least there's some hope for if I think some of the existing but slightly less old plants have a certain set of standards, and then the newly built ones have a certain set of standards. So there's definitely a need to push for those types of standards. And same thing, I think, is the same logic behind the Clean Power Plant in the U.S. and other policies in other countries. We're also trying to just organize with communities to understand these health impacts, because some people just really don't know. Like I think, as Mariana was saying, there's just not enough knowledge that the same things that cause climate pollution also impact your health. So trying to raise awareness about that, and then some of our partners are also looking into how do you deal with the health impact. Like we know that there's cardiovascular and respiratory and developmental health impacts from air pollution, and we know that these communities are exposed to it. And meanwhile, we also know that their health clinics are inadequately or not able to deal with it. So how can we improve the health infrastructure? Those are just some of the ideas, I guess. I don't know if anyone else has other strategies.
No, it's okay, your answer. Nothing to add. It's difficult because stop breathing, we can't. So we have to fight for our rights and try to change really the situation, the standards, and to ask for a cleaner air. We have the right.
Thank you both. I don't know if Alice wants to add something to it, or maybe Ayin wants to go for the next question.
That's
Alice?
fine. We can go with the
great.
can go with the next question.
Thank you. So Ayin, tell us.
Okay, so our second question is related to insect-borne diseases. So we have a question like, for example, the Zika virus outbreak in Brazil. That's an insect-borne disease, and we see that a lot of insect-borne diseases are being spread faster. So the question is there really a connection between insect-borne diseases and climate change? And is there anything that can be prevent this, and is the health sector ready to answer this problem?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Alice, since you didn't speak, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, to answer the first part of the question, yes, there is a definite link between climate change and insect-borne diseases, mosquito-borne diseases, and tick-borne diseases as well. So it's multifactorial. So firstly, the change in climate, so a warmer climate and a warmer humidity, greater humidity, it changes the geographical areas can live and breed and reproduce and pass on various infectious diseases. And also the change in temperature and the change in humidity affects the infectious diseases themselves. So viruses such as dengue fever, chikungunya, the Zika virus, as well as the parasite causing malaria, Plasmodium. It affects the infectious disease's ability to replicate. So it has increased ability to replicate, and it affects the virulence of the disease itself. So its ability to be transmitted by the mosquitoes and by other insects, looking at other diseases, and so meaning that a far greater number of people are at risk of these different infectious diseases. Now, there are ways that we can control this, and for many years, the World Health Organization and other organizations and governments have been focusing on eradicating infectious diseases through implementations such as removing areas of stagnant water, through mosquito nets, through various infrastructure in buildings, air conditioning and things like that. We look at areas such as Europe, which one point in time in history had diseases such as malaria, and we're no longer seeing malaria in Europe, although perhaps there could be outbreaks in the future. So there definitely is the opportunity to tackle these diseases, to prevent the greatest impact as a result of climate change, but it is still a huge risk. If Jennifer or Mariana would like to expand on that.
It's okay.
Great, thank you for this extensive response, and that was very detailed. So I hope you answered the question from our viewers, and now I think Ayin has another one.
Yes, so I do have a maybe last question for our webinar. So another question is, is there any major international debate or contention on the science of climate and health? So are there any doubts that there is a connection between, climate change and health, and how do we answer these?
I think in the latest IPCC report, so this was the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, their fifth assessment report. That's the latest that we've been referring to in terms like a big international scientific consensus, and there's a chapter on health in there, and there's not really a debate on the overall health impacts, but there's always different levels of severity and different levels of uncertainty for each health impact, and there's also differences in who's vulnerable. So, obviously coastal communities are going to be more vulnerable to sea level rise, but poor coastal communities are going to be even more vulnerable to it. So I think we're starting to get to a level of sophistication where we can kind of get at more detail and granularity in what those health impacts are. I'm kind of US-centric because I'm based in the US, and the US national government just released an updated report on the climate and health science last week. And so that got also at a lot more granularity in terms of, what the impacts are, what is the certainty, what kind of populations are affected. And also they looked at some other impacts such as mental health that were not previously explored as much. So yes, the science is pretty clear, and it's going to get clearer.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Does Alice or Mariana want to add something to that?
No, it's okay.
It's fine. Okay, so I guess this is the last question that we can take for now, because the webinar is supposed to last more or less an hour, and I guess these people has to do some other things. But if any of you, Alice, Jennifer, or Maria, want to add something like a last comment before we close, you are very welcome to do that.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to participate, and I think climate trackers are awesome, and I hope you are able to work on some great articles and get the message out, and feel free to contact me. I don't know where we can provide the contact information, but happy to answer more questions as we go along. And thanks, Mariana and Eileen, for organizing this as well.
Great, yeah, we'll make sure that we can... Oh yeah, I got it. We will make sure that we put your details, maybe your even Twitter account or something, so they can tweet at you or things like this. So thanks everyone. It was very nice to have you all. I hope you enjoyed this webinar, and let me just finish it by summarizing again what is this all about. So remember that you have to publish one article before this first publishing window ends. It's supposed to end this Friday or the 15th, but we will extend it until the 22nd. So that means that you have still a week, more than a week actually, to write about climate change, health impacts, and anything you like. And if you do that, you enter in the contest to be one of our 15 fellows. So you will have a paid fellowship, and we will be training you on how to write better, how to communicate better, and how to be a better tracker, I guess. And then we will start the second publishing window in May. That's where the Breakfree worldwide campaign starts, and we will also be writing articles. So in total, if by May the 15th you write 3 articles, you can join us. You may join us to our COP22 team, and maybe meet all of the girls here, so Alice and Jennifer and Ayin, because they may also be in COP22 to discuss health problems with all of us. I hope it's clear. Thank you, everyone, to be here. Ayin for the amazing tweets and all this. And feel free to engage with us on any of the social media or sending your articles or anything. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.